So let's say you want to numerically find the limit of a function as it approaches a certain value. Well, you want to plug in values that get closer and closer. And so that means you're going to have to plug in several numbers. And let's make this easier on ourselves by using the calculator to do it. So first, let's turn our calculator on. And what we want to do is enter our value, our equation, our function. And so you're going to go to the y equals button. And I'll type in the function that we're talking about, 1 over x minus 2 plus 3. But recall that if you have something in the denominator and is more than one term, you have to keep that whole denominator together with parentheses. We use this for a variable, minus 2. All right, and now that we're done with the denominator, we just write plus 3. All right, so there's our function. And then what we want to do is define how do we want to look at that table of values. And so we go second window, which is the table set function. And if I have it set to auto, then it's going to start at 0 and go increasing numbers by 1. So let's just see what that looks like. Let's go to second table, and you can see we're plugging in numbers, but when it plugged in 2, it got an error. So that's because when you plug in 2 to this function, my denominator is 0, there is no value there. And we continue seeing all these values here. What happens if we plug in different numbers? Let's go back to our table set. So second table set, I can say start at -5 and increase by 3. They'll start at -5 and then it'll add 3 every time. So it says plus 3 is -2, plus 3 is 1, plus 3 is 4. And so you see my x values, the gap will always be 3 because that's what I set as my delta. And so you can see the values here. Well, that's not good enough. I want to find the limit as this approaches 2. So instead of using the automatic table, I'm going to scroll down to the independent variable and tell it to ask. And hit enter. All right. And so these numbers up here don't matter when we're telling this to ask. What happens now? Let's go to our table and let's see. Notice how it's all blank because now it's asking us what values do we want. So we want to see the limit as it approaches 2. So let's start at 1. And then let's see what happens at 1.5. And notice that I'm just plugging in numbers, and then we're seeing as these numbers get closer and closer to 2, what's happening to my values. 1.99, 1.999, and you can continue doing this, and then you can see, oh wow, that number is getting larger and larger and larger in value, but it's negative, so it's going to go towards negative infinity. And you can plug in, and notice that on the value, it's rounding up your value to 2, even though we know we're plugging in 1.9999. And so we can assume that the limit of this value, the limit of this function is approaching negative infinity as x approaches 2 from the left-hand side. Let's go ahead and try this again. So let's clear all of our values. I'm using the delete. Okay, so what happens if we approach 2 from the positive side? Let's start at 3, and then 2.5, and then 2.1, and then 2.01. I notice what's happening to this value. It's getting larger and larger and larger. That's 1 times 10 to the 6th power. That would be 1 million. And notice that over here, it's rounding the number again. So as we get smaller and smaller and smaller, it's going to round the number to 2. But you remember, we actually inputted 2.000001. And so you can see that number is getting larger and larger. As x approaches 2 from the positive side, my y value approaches infinity. All right, so that's how you can use your calculators to help you find the limits.